do believe.
I think you're right, Colin. It's OddCast14, and we're starting a series of 6 looking at ultra high net worth client due diligence, or is that enhanced due diligence?
Yeah, I suppose that depends on the client themselves, doesn't it? Because I often get asked, well, I often get told, I need EDD. And when you actually delve into it a bit more, it's not EDD, it's just CDD, customer due diligence, enhanced due diligence. And then we could go down a completely open road on that one and spend a lot of time talking about the differences. But I very much specialize in bespoke offerings to clients and based on what they want. So, but we're going to talk about adverse media, weren't we?
We were. So what's adverse media to you?
Well, I suppose if you break those two terms down to adverse and media, media is one thing, isn't it? And there are many media channels. So I think a lot of people view media as the news channels. Well, in actual fact, it's much bigger now, isn't it? When you think about social media, very much in the spotlight right now, particularly with the disorder that's going on across the UK. And a lot of debate about shutting down social media sites, etc., and shutting down people on social media. But negative news, maybe adverse information, it's all quite different. And I suppose you have to contextualize that in relation to what you've been asked to do.
For me, something that I actually wrote down as you were speaking is that for there to be adverse media, somebody needs to be somebody else's adversary. Somebody needs to be setting out to challenge or topple or contest the position of somebody else. And I also just wanted to comment. I saw BBC Verify yesterday explain who Network 3 were. And Network 3 was the organization who firstly came out and wrongly named and characterized the person involved in the Stockport tragedy. Now, the Stockport tragedy needs really probably just massive appreciation and understanding. But it was an organization called Network 3, ran by 3 people in strange parts of the world with no connection to the UK, who claimed they knew who the attacker was. And I think their motives were really bizarre. But Colin, how does adverse media, as in information shared by an adversary, impact on the work you do for due diligence?
Well, that's probably one of the areas you're going to be looking for first of all. And we're in this world and have been for some time, open source intelligence, you might call it. I often refer to it as open source information because it won't become intelligence until such time as somebody like me does a bit of work on it. So you do some analysis. So when I'm looking for adverse information, and I go through a sort of model in my own head, really, that the first thing you've got to do is look at the source of that information. Is it a credible source? And you've just mentioned there the net worth. I've not heard of that, but are they a credible source? It sounds to me, what you've just said, they're not. So you've got to look at the source. So, for example, a news media, say an established news media source like Sky, BBC, Al Jazeera, credible source? Yes, you would say so. But they're also going to have their own biases towards the way they report. So you've got to look across the piece really and understand, okay, that journalist will report in a certain way, that journalist will report in a certain way. There is without doubt media control, absolutely. And that's another subject altogether. So you've got to step back and analyze it objectively. But some of the other things I would look at is the history of that piece. I've seen so many mistakes made with people not looking at the history of information. It could be because they've looked on Google and it's at the top, but it's actually 20 years old. So you've got to look at accuracy. You've got to look for a corroboration. And the other thing, particularly with social media, I would say is look at the emotionally charged information, that some of the words that are being used there. But it is a challenge, as an investigator now.
I like what you said, which is information becomes intelligence when you've considered it and you've determined its source, any bias, its reliability, whether it's contemporaneous or historic. And I think you should use that as a byline on some of your work. I turn information into intelligence.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I won't charge you for that.
No, no. Well, I've used that in the past, but I don't think that people necessarily understand it outside of the world of policing, if that makes sense. But basically, you're collecting, you are evaluating, you're collating it, you are conducting analysis, you then disseminate. But you have a plan before you do all of that. So you have a plan in your mind before you go off online, particularly online, and look for stuff. So yeah, the intelligence cycle, they would call that. And again, that's part of when I run courses and training, we always talk about the intelligence cycle because it's a well-established model and works extremely well.
What I like there, Colin, and this is from my non-police background, is you circle back to check. You circle back and you decide what's reliable and what is arguably dismissed.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get to the point of what is it that we can rely upon?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, in undertaking due diligence, we're trying to determine if for us the risk of the client is acceptable. Now, it might be the client still proves to be unacceptable, but then at least we have a defense that we've done something,
Exactly.
we followed procedures. Which brings me, Colin, with no effort at all, to 25 seconds, and it's over to you.
Put me under, right, question the answers is what I would say. Right, okay.
Question the answers.
Yeah, a very relevant joke for today. So Aladdin has been banned from the Olympic magic carpet race. Did you know that?
I hadn't heard that. What's new source was that?
Apparently it's been used in performance enhancing rugs.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.